If I could control Z anything, I would change and rethink how we deal with periods. In recent years, the traditional practice of using cotton cloth for menstruation has been tossed aside in favour of a modern idea that has found fertile ground, the disposable sanitary napkin. I believe that this well-intentioned idea has had unintentional and problematic consequences, and new thinking is required, not just about the products themselves, but about menstruation as a whole. Prior to napkins, which in India means about 30 years, most women used cotton cloth. I am sure your grandmothers will all be able to tell you stories about their experiences of using cloth for menstruation. Perhaps they lamented the drudgery of washing or spoke about their fears of leaking and shaming themselves. Or maybe they genuinely liked cloth and appreciated it for its softness, its naturalness, and perhaps even the money they saved. See, like so much in life, when it comes to menstrual products, it is never so black and white. And my point here isn't to guilt trip you into throwing away your plastic bags, pads, and turning the clock back to do what Grandma did. What I'm going to speak about, though, is that when it comes to menstrual products, the way we make choices and what informs our decision-making may be more complex than we care to think about. Do you even know you have choices? Anyone with a TV is presented a single option. The message is loud and clear that a modern woman should use a disposable pad. Yet, there are multiple effective product options like menstrual cups, cloth pads, period panties, and it is worth taking time to learn about them all. Today, I want us to reconsider the value of one option, the humble and increasingly disappearing cotton cloth. I'm not claiming it as the best menstrual product because I actually don't think that such a product exists. But I do want to make a case for it and perhaps in the process help you consider not just cloth's virtues with fresh eyes, but the whole way we have been taught to think about menstruation. I realise this is a bit of a geeky topic. You may be wondering why I, a Western woman who presumably never ever had to think about using cotton cloth for menstruation, is bothering to speak with you about this at all. It has been a journey. When I first got my period back in the 1980s, my welcome to womanhood talk consisted of my mother presenting me a packet of white, pillow-like pads which were heavily perfumed and suspiciously called Carefree. I was educated in how to use, and most importantly, how to dispose of these products when I was finished. I was to carefully wrap them in a piece of newspaper when I was done and place them in a discreet little bin that was next to the toilet. Concealment was the unspoken message, and I needed to not make a mess. I never questioned my use of disposable menstrual products, nor where these products ended up, until 1997 when I moved to India. I had chosen to live in Auroville, an international community in rural Tamil Nadu. And surrounded by trees and the lush nature, I began to understand and absorb something about our profound interconnection with the natural world. In stark contrast, the smell of burning plastic and the mounting garbage piles from the neighbouring villages was disturbing and confronting. When it came time for me to deal with my sanitary waste, I assumed that just like in Australia, there would be somewhere where I could just throw these pads and make them go away. I never in my wildest dreams imagined that disposal would involve me having to dig a hole to bury my waste. From now on, clearly, managing my waste was going to be my responsibility, and it was going to be hard work. This rude awakening turned out to be the beginning of my journey to find another approach. A year later, I was visiting my brother in New Zealand, and in the corner of a small village store, I stumbled upon a cloth cotton menstrual pad that was made of flannel. It was unbranded, home-stitched, it looked cute and comfy, and I thought, why not give it a go? I bought it without hesitation. On my return to Auroville, I couldn't wait to try it out, but soon encountered my next challenge. When washing time came along, I felt uneasy about the prospect of getting blood on my hands. I thought about why I found this disturbing and realised that part of me believed that there was something offensive about my menstrual blood. Washing actually turned out to be really straightforward. It involves soaking the cloth pads in a small bucket of cold water which release most of the blood, then washing them with soap. They can also be machine washed, then rinsing thoroughly and hanging them in the sun to dry. It was far less work and certainly less of a mess than I feared or imagined. I was delighted and there was no turning back. My journey with cloth pads had begun. I started to produce cloth pads for women in Auroville, more as a hobby than as a livelihood, and found interest in the products and even received orders to sell the products abroad. Fast forward 8 years and I began working with an Auroville NGO. My job was involved helping rural women to find income generating activities. And I thought about these cloth pads and how all it would require was learning how to use the sewing machine. I felt and believed with some focused effort that it would be possible to make this work as a micro-enterprise. My friend Jessamine Madema shared my confidence in this idea, and this was how Eco Femme, the social enterprise that we co-founded together, was born. As the name implies, Eco Femme is a project that works at the intersection of women and the environment, and the cloth washable pad is a product that's at the heart of our project. Cloth pads are a redesign of the traditional practice of using cloth, but with a few tweaks, mostly leak-proofing and wings to make them more functional for mobile modern women. It's a few steps on from what Grandma would have used, but the basic ingredient, cotton cloth, remains the same. We started to show and tell about these products and were surprised to discover something very powerful was happening. Women would begin to speak about their relationships with their bodies, about sex and fertility, about cultural practices and beliefs, and they shared about the challenges they faced of disposing of their sanitary waste. Men would speak about blocked drains from pads, or share childhood memories of mothers and aunties that mysteriously disappeared every month for a few days when they were chumming. Evidently, cloth pads were far more than a menstrual product. They became a subversive and intimate entry point into conversations about the cultural values and beliefs that have shaped our thinking about menstruation, about what exactly is healthy menstruation and how does dignity fit into the picture, and of course about the environment and the real lived realities of sanitary waste disposal. I began to see these recurring themes as red threads, and unravelling them is what I would like to do during our remaining time together. We learned early on that disposable napkins were rapidly replacing cloth as the preferred product of choice to catch menstrual flow. We therefore wanted to find out what exactly is in a disposable napkin. And here's what we found out. It turns out that a single sanitary napkin contains approximately 4 plastic bags worth of plastic. We then discovered that a single napkin also takes about 500 to 800 years to break down. We did the math to try and understand what this would mean for India if every woman would start using a sanitary napkin for their menstruation. We learned that in 2017, 12.3 billion sanitary napkins were disposed of, and that the forecast based on adoption trends estimates that this will amount to approximately 800,000 tonnes of sanitary waste by the year 2030. The next obvious problem then becomes, how are we getting rid of this waste? And this is what we learned. The inconvenient truth is that plastic never fully goes away and only breaks down into smaller and smaller particles, what we know as microplastics. Given the mostly plastic composition of disposable napkins, we have a real problem here. On the waste impact metric, cloth clearly outperforms disposables. Yet I don't think anyone should ever adopt a sustainable practice at the expense of health and safety. So let's take a look at health. One of the biggest hesitations to using cloth is the perception that cloth is dirty and unhygienic. Our research, though, revealed that it is not the cloth per se, but rather the way that it is cared for that determines its safety. Cotton cloth, like underwear, is neutral. As a natural fibre, it is breathable, and especially if organic, it is free from chemicals and pesticides. Organisations like UNICEF have declared cotton cloth, when clean, that is properly washed, dried and stored in a clean place, is safe and acceptable as a menstrual absorbent. So, if clean cloth is safe, then the next question might be, are sanitary napkins, as the name sanitary implies, even cleaner and safer? To answer this question, we come back to the ingredients. And it turns out that plastic and the chemicals found in sanitary napkins are contaminating not only the earth, but users as well. This is because the vaginal area, like the mouth, is among the most sensitive and porous tissue in the human body. When chemicals come into contact with the vagina, these can be directly absorbed into the bloodstream and circulate around the body. One American advocacy organisation, Women's Voices for the Earth, investigated the ingredients of Always pads, which in India are branded as Whisper, and they found out that there are a number of known toxic chemicals inside these pads. Considering that the average woman will spend approximately 3,500 days of her whole life menstruating, does it sound healthy to expose our sensitive vaginal skin for sustained and extended periods of time to products that contain substances that are known to be harmful to humans? Rashes and allergic reactions are also commonly experienced by users of commercially available pads, and switching to these cotton cloth actually ends up often resolving these symptoms. So considering how well clean cotton cloth performs on the health metric, you may be now wondering, why is there not more being said or done to insist on better, safer products? I believe the answer to this question can be found in the third and perhaps most tangled thread of all, the cultural dimension. While we have come a long way towards acknowledging the existence of menstruation, we still have a long way to come to really normalise it. The menstrual taboo is a real thing, and it's a set of ideas that are embedded in culture which have far-reaching and problematic consequences. Research has shown that the culture of silence and stigma that surrounds menstruation leads to the fact that 52% of adolescent girls don't actually know what is happening to them when they get their first period, or that 24% of schoolgirls end up missing school days during menstruation, and underreporting of easily treatable menstrual symptoms because of shyness and embarrassment. See, we live in a culture where we have unconsciously absorbed messages that tell us that there is something dirty and shameful about the menstruating body. It is not exclusive to India. Earlier in the talk, I described my own aversion to menstrual blood, which I discovered when I washed my first cloth pad for the first time. So let us now inquire into the consequences of this culture of shame and secrecy and how it influences our product choices. Consider this: if we had an easy and natural relationship with menstruation, how likely are we to accept the ubiquitous black plastic bag when we buy menstrual products from the markets? Would we tolerate advertisements that try to convince us that menstrual blood is blue instead of red? Would we be as comfortable using so-called disposable products that have actually no place to go because they are so full of plastic? And would we accept the lack of disclosure about the ingredients inside of pads, thus exposing ourselves to health risks? Yet we do tolerate and accept these deceptions because our discomfort with menstruation has enabled us to prioritise convenience and discretion over the ill effects on our bodies and the earth. Having pondered this deeply for a long time, I can't help but wonder if this discomfort is being manufactured. Let's take an example of a typical advertisement. What are we being sold? The name Whisper says it all, really. Discretion. And in this particular case, added protection. And for what do we need added protection? The leak, of course. I can't help but wonder, is the freedom not to leak the best thing that these products have to offer us? And are we entirely comfortable with the price we have to pay for absolute discretion and protection? To really understand this cultural dimension, ask yourself, men and women alike, a simple question. What do you think about menstruation? What unconscious messages might you have absorbed through a culture that denies and is uncomfortable with menstruation? I believe that there is another way of looking at menstruation and period products that doesn't involve trade-offs, but instead can enable us to include multiple bottom lines that value our health and environment without sacrificing dignity. If you come to recognise that you might have taken on some unhealthy biases, then your priorities might start to change naturally. You may find yourself willing to explore your experience of menstruation with greater curiosity and empathy. It may become less important to you to have a high-tech product that ensures that you will never ever have to worry about a leak ever again. And more important, to use a menstrual product that is comfortable, that is safe for the human body, performs well enough, and doesn't leave a mess behind for somebody else to clean up. The point I would like to amplify, not whisper, is this. I would like to empower you to learn about menstrual product options and make a choice that is truly your own. I want to encourage critical and reflective thinking about how we have been presented or perhaps denied choices, and consider the impact of so-called disposable products on the earth, on our bodies, and on our cultural mindsets. And if we can free up our thinking, you too might choose or advocate for a tried and true cloth, or at least give it a seat at the table of options. The important thing to understand is that the power of informed choice is truly in your hands, and what you decide has far bigger consequences than you may have imagined. Thank you.